has more than 25 years experience as a marketer and communicator. Please welcome Tim Marklein, CEO and founder of Big Valley, on the stage.
Thank you.
Tim.
I didn't prepare with this. As he mentioned, I'm Tim Marklein, the founder and CEO of Big Valley Marketing. We are a consulting firm that works with technology companies to help them grow, win, and lead in their markets. I'm going to try to stir up a little bit of trouble today by talking to a room full of people who create a lot of data and a lot of insights and really question, where does that go and what do clients actually do or colleagues actually do with that data and insight? And I would say in a lot of cases, we're delivering reports and presentations that go nowhere. So more to come. How do we effectively overcome that? So we live in a world where there's so much data. AI is creating more data, consuming more data, but there's so little insight. I think we see this across the landscape. The business leaders, marketing leaders, communication leaders are trying to figure out what's going on, and they need help. Who do they go to for that help? They go to a lot of the people in this room who do research and analytics and measurement. The goal for a lot of us is really wrapped around trying to produce some sort of insight. That insight gets delivered in some sort of report. Hopefully there's some sort of presentation. Actually, I should have dashboards on the right here too. So there are a number of ways that those get delivered, but we hear time and time again that a client will buy a dashboard and not use it, that they will get a report and then they will move on with the rest of the month and just do whatever they were going to do anyway. They may not get a presentation, or you all may produce some really great insight that never gets presented to the client because there's not an actual live conversation that happens around the data, and so then it just does not get used. I would posit that actually this is where, while our jobs are hard as research and analytics and insights professionals, we need to make them harder. We need to go the extra mile to be able to make the data actionable. We cannot just wait or accept for the client to figure out how to make it actionable. Part of this is moving beyond just insights and getting into the second question that I feel like every piece of research needs to answer, not just so what, but now what? Now, the reality is most research, analytics, and insights professionals may not know how to go translate an insight into, well, how does that impact a campaign? How does that drive the decision-making process that is involved from a business standpoint? I believe we need to step out of our box a bit as research, analytics, and insights professionals and go drive those conversations. We may not have the answer, we may not have the recommendation, but unless we're driving that conversation and making sure that conversation happens, that's when the data just goes circling down the drain. So, and on the flip side, from a client standpoint, whether it's a business leader, a marketing leader, communications leader, there's a lot of lip service that is paid to data-driven decision-making. All too often, though, you see people still making decisions based on gut instinct, based on a variety of things that may be they're hearing, based on political influences internally or externally. So the only way to really bring this to life is by investing in really understanding what decisions are people trying to drive, what strategies can we impact, and what actions are people taking with the data that comes to life. So I would posit that there's a big gap here between what a researcher or an analyst does in terms of analyzing the data and socializing the insights versus what a marketer or communicator or business leader does and needs to do, which is to consume the data and apply the insights. There are different skills on both sides, and I feel like for too long we've had those skills are separated and people work in their own silos and don't cross the chasm of that or do the Vulcan mind meld to be able to really connect the dots among this. Part of this is just having real live conversations when we're surfacing data, when we're surfacing insights. And I'm sure many of you have been in situations where you go present some data or some insights, and then the marketers or the communicators in the room have no questions, have no comments. That's the worst possible outcome. If we can't actually drive some engagement, and I see eyes glaze over with clients all the time or colleagues within agencies who will get a report, they'll go, oh, cool, I'll just deliver the report to the client. I'll email it off to the client. Check, I'm done, now I get to move on. Well, no, let's have a conversation about what did we learn? What does that mean? How can we apply that to the decision-making process, to the strategies that we're trying to drive, to the actions that we're trying to drive? And this requires work on both sides. It requires some skills sharing on both sides, but ultimately it really depends on having a conversation where we're challenging each other to be able to go look at things from different sides. Another key aspect of this to me is really looking at how you can align with decision cycles within a company. If we want to impact decisions, we need to understand how the decisions are being made. So I look at this, there are various cycles that clients or companies usually go through to be able to make decisions. From a week-to-week basis, most marketers, most communicators, most business leaders are just executing. They're managing the execution of the business, and so there are some decisions that are being made, but those decisions are primarily around tactics, timing, and programming. On a monthly basis, there's some sort of optimization, ideally, that is happening based on what people are learning, and they're looking at what's working, what's not, what has changed, and how can that go impact decisions that people are making, from adjusting content and channel strategy to improving messaging to adapting to industry trends and competitors. So there's a lot of learning, obviously, that can factor into that monthly optimization cycle. On a quarterly basis, most companies that we work with basically do quarterly business reviews of some sort. They might be at a business level, they might be at a marketing level, they might even translate down to a communications level. Within technology, usually the communications review is part of the quarterly marketing review. But that cycle, it's actually amazing how many times we're working with a client who will freak out because all of a sudden there's a quarterly business review next week and we need to pull together data for that report. Well, we kind of know it's happening quarterly, so can't we prepare for that and build that into the normal cycle of what we do? But there are decisions being made there which are really checking progress against the goals that you set for the year, reviewing, again, what's working and what's not working, but more in the context of strategy and operations, and looking at things that need to be addressed or changed. Because that change is harder to do on a weekly cycle or monthly cycle, so it happens on a quarterly cycle. And then obviously annual planning, as where companies get together to be able to really figure out, okay, what are we going to go do for the next year, determining objectives, strategies, priorities, looking at business marketing and communications plans more in depth. Across these cycles, data and insight are really valuable, but dare I say, too many because we get fixated on reporting, too many of the reporting cycles are either monthly or quarterly and miss the other ones, and so we're really siloing the data and insights that we're bringing to the table because they're not fitting into these decision cycles. And the nature of the decisions that are being made at each of these levels is different, so we need different data and different insights in each of these cycles. The other thing that I think we need to do a lot more is close the loop and ask the follow-up questions. What decisions did you or your client make based on the data and the insight that we surfaced? What strategies did it inform? What actions did it take? So, okay, if you are in that monthly reporting cycle, go back a week or two later and say, hey, what changed? What did you decide? What did you do differently? And based on that learning, let's adjust our analytics process and or adjust our engagement approach. Maybe we need to have more conversations around the data. Maybe when you go back to answer that question, they said, well, I really didn't understand what you shared with me, or that insight was a little bit too generic and we need to get more deep into what's really behind that. All of that learning can be really helpful to make the data and the insight much more actionable. So I'm going to leave you with a couple key takeaways and then open it up for questions. Don't be satisfied with reporting. I know we all do a lot of it, and I'm not saying we're not going to do reporting. But if the end goal is the report, we're missing something. The end goal has to be a decision or a strategy or an action, or a combination of all three. We should always be answering two critical questions. So what? That's the insight. And then now what? What are the recommendations? And to me, that has to be a socialization process where it's not just the research and analytics professionals or just the marketing and communications professionals. It needs to be an integrated conversation where you're looking at it from all sides. Invest in that mind meld with your clients or colleagues so that you can kind of get past the various biases and predispositions that we have based on our history and our roles and based on whether we like data, whether we're afraid of data, or somewhere in between. Look at how you can align with those decision cycles. Try to understand what decisions people are trying to make. Even ask that question before you go in and pull together a metric. Like, okay, what decision would you try to make with that data? We've got one client that we're working with who has a specific metric about PR-influenced media coverage. I don't know what decision they're going to make by knowing that, hey, we increased the number of PR-influenced articles from 24 to 36 from month to month. The idea there is that, oh, well, actually, we called the reporter to be able to go place that story as if that is inherently different than we published a news release, never called the reporter, but they wrote about it anyway. What decision are you going to make differently based on that metric? Just one example, but we see it all the time. So aligning this with those decision cycles and then closing the loop. What decisions, what strategies, what actions did you impact? Questions? Comments?
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim in the audience? No questions in the audience? Oh, there. Rennie.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you. I was just wondering about the mind meld. Do you have like techniques or ways to spur a very lively and nice discussion that would then lead to decision making? And because like you said, the usual thing is to see a report and oh, we did good, okay, or just keep it. So how do we get to that mind meld stage and make sure that we have discussions that lead to something?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I have any specific techniques. I think the first part is having the conversation. I think the second part is getting past the niceties of, oh yeah, we're part of a team, we like each other, even though okay, I'm speaking Greek and you're speaking Chinese, and we're just talking past each other. I do think a lot of times, particularly and I would say this for marketing and communications. As I said, there's a lot of lip service paid to being data-driven, but then people don't actually invest in the data. They don't think through, well, what can I go do with this data? How do I consume it? How do I apply it? You kind of need to have those uncomfortable situations where you're sitting in a room and no, I'm going to force you all to really let's absorb this data. Let's try to understand what's going on. Let's think through what's going on. I find actually people tend to think in silos of whatever their role is. So the research and analytics people will think of it in one context, and actually even research people will think of it differently than analytics people. And the marketing people will think of it differently than the communications people. So the more that you can bring kind of multiple stakeholders in, but there does need to be an element of kind of forcing people outside of their comfort zone and asking some provocative questions and dealing with the uncomfortable silence, or hey, what can we go do based on this insight that might require somebody to kind of think differently about their role. And so over time, organizationally, I think this does come down to, okay, trying to build up some data literacy over time, and there's some training and some development that you can do there, but I think it just starts with having the conversation, getting uncomfortable with it, and pushing people outside of their comfort zones.
All right.
Rennie and then Paul.
Yeah. Rennie from Broadpoint and the AMEC Board of Directors. Thank you for the presentation, Tim. This was fascinating to see your perspective as well. I have two questions, actually. One is, how do you have a challenging conversation with a client who doesn't want to look beyond reporting, and what does the education looks like? And the second one is, can you explain the origins of the name of your company, Big Value Marketing? If you want.
Have you heard a story about that?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
Please do.
So to the first one, I think part of it is to have that uncomfortable conversation, you need to be comfortable with having it yourself. I mentioned at the beginning, I think of us as a consulting firm. We're kind of a bridge between a consultancy and an agency. There are problems with either term, but to me the notion of being an agent is part of the problem. If we are agents, we're going to go tell the client what they want to hear. If we're consultants, we're going to go have a peer-to-peer conversation and tell them what they need to know. And if you look at the way the McKinseys of the world work and any of the major consulting firms, their relationship, their dynamic is completely different than the way that I think most PR agencies or PR consultants work. So to me, it is kind of embracing that mantle of like, no, I've got some expertise here. I think Johnny actually mentioned it this morning about walking with some swagger and knowing, like, know what you know and be confident in what you know and bring that to the table. And don't do this thing that I see over and over again, not just in PR, but marketing servicing firms too, will go subordinate what they know to whatever the client is asking. And if you think about the RFP process that clients go through to hire agencies, it's kind of the same thing. Here are the list of 17 questions that we're going to ask, and then we just go dutifully answer those 17 questions. No, we are firms with a history, with insight, with expertise. Let's go bring that to the table and have much more of a peer-to-peer conversation. Now, it's not going to be a single conversation that leads to that change that you want to go drive. It might be 7 conversations. I remember back early in my career, we were working with a client it was a client at Oracle. He was a PR manager, a PR director there for all of product PR. There was this thing emerging called the internet. We were working with the marketing people, and there were some really smart marketing people who saw the future of what the internet could be, how that would impact database technology, things that they were doing with their customers. This PR director didn't want to have any of it, didn't want to invest any time in the internet, and we kind of concluded, okay, we need to go help him see what we're seeing. We went through about a 6-month effort to be able to go feed him information and things that we were seeing in the market to be able to go help change his perspective. So, I think a lot of times people will go in, hey, I'm going to go have a tough conversation and check, that's it. But like in other cases, you might need to go through a much longer effort to be able to go drive that. Oh, so the name of the firm, so part of it was we're trying to bring back some of the core essence of what Silicon Valley marketing has done over the years to Silicon Valley. Since too much of Silicon Valley is being served by, not picking on any places per se, but New York-based agencies, London agencies, Chicago agencies, and there's something unique about Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley marketing and the history of it that we want to bring back. So that's the Valley part of it. The big part of it is I'm a huge Big Country fan, and so as I was thinking of names, those things just crossed over, and it's like, oh, Big Valley, of course. It's not just a location, but it's an idea. It's something that lives beyond a place.
Okay.
Are we okay to ask?
Quick
Paul,
question from Paul. Yeah.
Quick observation. I had no idea there was such a thing as a big
Here's the
country
microphone
fan.
for the online.
My question may be just a variation of the first question you got there, but that question of now what is one that I suspect a lot of PR firms think they should be answering, and you should just shut the up and let them. A lot of clients may indeed think that the consultative role is theirs primarily. How do you do it in a way that is collaborative rather than you stepping on the toes of any of the other parties involved?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. As a firm, we play, but we're on both sides of that. So while we do have core research and analytics that we bring to the table, we're also consulting with them on the marketing and communications work. But I would say if you're a firm that is just, your role is research and analytics, to me it's about having the conversation, not going in and saying, okay, here's what you should go do because that might step on the toes of somebody, but I think you should expect to, we should be part of the conversation about how to go translate that insight into the decision, into the action, because inevitably there's depth of work that has gone on underneath that insight, that if you just hand over the report and the client or the agency decides, oh, we're going to do a marketing campaign around X, or we're going to change our message from this to this, in that process, they may miss some of the nuance or the detail that's underneath that insight. And so to me, it has to be a collaborative process if it's really going to work well. And to be honest, if you're the client or if you're the agency in that dynamic, your research and insights professionals are going to be much more attuned to the nature of what you're trying to do if they're in that conversation. So the more collaborative it can be, the better. That might mean you need to invest some time to be able to go do that and have that conversation that you're not paid for. But to me, that's always going to pay off because you're going to be richer for it and the client's going to be richer for it as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Another round of applause.